I'd like to call the Tuesday, September 6, 2022 Papillion City Council meeting to order. Ms. Brown, would you please take the roll?
Sunday. Mumgard. Gaines. Glover. Jaworski. Klug. Stubbe. Engberg.
Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. And do we have an affidavit of publication on file?
We do.
And a current copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted in the back of the council chambers. Mr. Green, Administrator's report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A reminder to the public that the annual budget public hearing will be held tonight at 7:30 or immediately following the regular council meeting, whichever occurs first. Good to report that the City of Papillion is not required to attend the county-wide budget hearing at the end of September because the property tax increase in this year's budget is less than 2%. The annual Salute to Public Safety and 9/11 Memorial will be held this coming Sunday, September 11th. The ceremony will begin at 7:30 a.m. and is held in the parking lot at the Shadow Lake Hy-Vee. Friday Night Bites, featuring a variety of food trucks, will be held at the Papillion Landing in September on Friday the 16th and the 23rd. And finally, just a reminder that the fall cleanup days are scheduled for October 17th through the 23rd. Those take place from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Public Works Department facility. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Councilman Jaworski, second by Councilman Klug. Do you have any proponents or opponents? Any council discussion? Please vote.
Seven yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Next two are related items with Granite Creek East. E1, Ordinance 1973, an ordinance to approve a change of zone from AG Agricultural to R4 Multifamily Residential, R4 PUD2 Multifamily Residential with a specific planned unit overlay, and LC Limited Commercial for the property legally described as attractive land, being part of the northeast quarter of the southeast quarter, part of the southeast quarter of the southeast quarter, part of the southwest quarter of the southeast quarter, part of the northwest quarter of the southeast quarter, part of the northeast quarter of the southwest quarter, and part of the southeast quarter of the southwest quarter. All in Section 28, Township 14 North, Range 12 East, 6 p.m., generally located southwest corner, South 96th Street and Lincoln Road, the applicant's BHI development. It's a public hearing. I'll open it. Proponents.
Good evening. My name is Mark Westergaard. I'm with the E&A Consulting Group, 10909 Mill Valley Road. With me tonight are Jeff Lamontagne, who's the project manager for the project, and Pat Sullivan, who's the attorney for the project. Even though this had unanimous approval at Planning Commission and the report is clean, we've addressed all the issues. I am going to give you an overview for a little bit. Because it's such a large project, and I think it might be worthwhile, and we can answer any questions after that. I won't take too much of your time. This is Jerry Torzon is the developer of all of it. It is a large parcel that is split into two separate projects, Granite Creek East and Granite Creek West. Before you tonight is just Granite Creek East, but I got to encompass a little bit of the whole project in order to give you an overview of the lay of the land. So it goes all the way from Whitmas to 96th Street and all the way from Highway 370 to Lincoln Road. So it's a very large piece of ground. Plus there's a parcel of ground on the south side, which is part of Granite Creek West. Why two subdivisions? It was really pretty simple. Jerry Torzon splits a lot of his work between our firm, E&A Consulting, and Lamprey Nearson. He desired to do that also in this case, and so he simply split it up. So that's why we have two projects. We will have two separate SIDs out here as well, but as you look and as staff looked at the financial part of this project, they put both of them together and looked at them as a whole. So it's kind of a unique subdivision, even though it's so big, because there's a number of different types of residential uses, some commercial uses, some apartments. It's all encompassed. There's some of what Jerry Torzon has built in Granite Lake, for instance, some of those size of lots. There's some of the very large lots, down in Shadow, can't think of the name, anyway, Shadow Lake. And then there are a section of duplexes, there's a section of just two-story apartments, which are very attractive. And then there's a section that are Jerry's Richland product, which is like Granite Falls North. So they're kind of equally split up. There's an elementary school on the site, about 11 acres. And one of the big things that is a real plus for the city of Papillion, because it ties into Papillion Landing, is there is a nice 18-acre wooded parcel that's right on the corner of 96th and Lincoln, and that's proposed to be a very large park, in addition to a active park with a playground and probably a splash park, although that's yet to be determined. And then there's a lineal trail that goes down along Walnut Creek that connects all the way down to the dam site under 370, where there's an existing pedestrian. So you get Walnut Creek, the opportunity to tie in Walnut Creek to Papillion Landing, which is a kind of a huge deal and something I think the city has wanted to do for quite a while. There are a few design considerations on this, and I'll go over them really quickly. 102nd Street is the primary access onto 370. In working with the state, that location is going to be moved to the west about 200 feet, to the east about 200 feet to accommodate a turning movement on the south side. The state has given preliminary approval to that already. There are a few cul-de-sacs on this site, which in general, City of Papillion discourages. Because of the terrain and some other things, the school site, et cetera, we've given justification for all of those cul-de-sacs, and staff has been okay with those. On our particular project, there is one section that does have a PUD, not the single-family detached residential, just the duplexes. That is the only one that is requested for PUD zoning. Lincoln Road was previously improved, and we'll be making a contribution back to the county for those improvements that were previously paid for. Talked about the park a little bit. There is a small piece of commercial ground, about 6.6 acres, right down on Highway 370, and that is proposed to be connected to the trail system, and it will certainly have a pedestrian-friendly atmosphere down there. That's what Jerry has in mind for that location. With all the amenities that we have, the costs are relatively high. We have a debt ratio of about 5.07 right now. Not ridiculous, but on the high side. There are fairly good chances with what is happening in the market right now that valuations will increase even above that, and we'll be fine. There's also a chance that some of these improvements won't go in day one, and they can be spread out a little bit and reduce that debt ratio. But an acceptable debt ratio, but not fantastic. So those are the highlights of the project. As I said, the Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval, and I would be happy to answer questions that you might have as the City Council tonight.
Mr. Mumgard.
Yeah, I don't know if my questions are for this one or for the preliminary plat, but let's get
I handle them both.
let's get into it anyhow. Yeah. I like the ideas. I like what you're doing. I like the ideas of the duplexes, et cetera, the smaller, the diversity of housing. I really like that. I'm looking at 97th Street. It appears that connects to the street that dead ends in the area just to the south of you, correct?
We do connect into Overland Hills 5, yes.
Okay. And I think that's the only place you can connect into that, isn't that correct? Okay, well, I'm glad you're doing that. My fear was that I was going to end up in one of those stupid dead ends, so I'm glad you're doing that. You got a lot of outlots in this, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. The big outlot D or F, where the drainage way is and the heavily wooded area, I've noticed the grading that's been going on there. They took out a lot, but yet they left a lot of the big stuff. Tell me, what do you envision that area to be like?
So there are a lot of outlots. Most of them are for detention basins. There are some that when the wetlands and the waters of the U.S. was delineated, they needed to be to retain as natural ground. There is also a fairly large, about 4-acre outlot that goes along Walnut Creek, and that is where the trail connection will be. I talked about to Walnut Creek Lake. There'll be a hard surface trail on one side, and there'll be a natural mulch type trail on the other side of that.
Let me interrupt. Will that be a trail that goes under the highway?
That will go under. There's an existing
Okay.
underpass underneath Highway 370 that will be. We're also going to try and do some improvements to that, some lighting, some more pedestrian, make it more pedestrian friendly. It's fine right now, but it could be better. So we've got that in our budget also to do some improvements there. But most of those outlots, I mean, we'd rather not have any outlots either. We'd rather have lots, but they're all pretty necessary. And the tree removal that was done was only done as we had to in order to get the street system in. Jerry wanted to save as many as he can, and in fact, between the duplex area and then what would be the Shadow Lake homes, we saved most of those trees.
Well, primarily, okay, the outlots that include the creek, are they gonna remain as green space, public open green space, or is there some other plan for that?
No, that's going to remain. There won't be any more trees taken down there, with the exception of where the street crossing goes across there. There's one street crossing with a structure.
But essentially, that'll be a long, open green space with a trail.
That will connect the 18-acre wooded area with Walnut Creek Lake, yes.
Okay. You mentioned that possibly there would be a splash pad in there, and I'll tell you, well, I'm not in favor of the splash pad in there. That's too close to the existing splash pad, but we'll talk about that later.
So, well, I just let me mention something, because where that came about is we were the engineers for both Granite Falls North and Granite Lake, and we got requested from the very beginning, we need a splash park. Yes, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Well, finally we have a place to put it, and so we put it in there and kind of tried to live up to our promises, and the city said, well, maybe we want something different. So that really hasn't been determined yet, and but we do have a lot that's set aside for a splash park or for some other purpose.
Well, yeah, I'm open to discussion about it, but my vision is that the next splash pad is on the other side, the south side of Highway 370, someplace down where all those houses are popping up. That's, to my mind, that's a better spot than what you would find here. But we'll discuss that later.
Okay.
Mr. Stubbe.
Mark, just can you give us a little bit of an idea as far as east, how you're going to phase it in? Is the PUD and the single family going to be done concurrently? And then also give us an idea with regard to the school. Obviously, it's an elementary school site. Is there any plan with regard to when? And then has a determination made relative to Buckboard and 96th Street? I'm assuming there will be a signal at that location, or has that been determined yet?
Gosh, Bob, you asked a lot of questions there.
Sorry.
All right.
That was pretty rapid fire, too.
Let's start in the backwards. 96th Street, the traffic study shows that currently turning lane movements are warranted, but a signal is not warranted at this time at the primary entrance. Not to say that they won't be warranted, but initially they were not. And of course at 102nd and 370, those will be warranted shortly after this project proceeds. Tell me your other questions.
PUD and single family.
So the whole project, both Granite Falls East and Granite Falls West, is going to proceed concurrently. And what allows us to do that is the variety in the land uses there. So if you've driven by there, you can see that the entire site is being graded. And we are planning to let the sanitary sewer for both east and west a day apart, so that we can maybe get the same contractor, maybe not. It depends on how that falls out. But but all of the improvements are expected to go forward concurrently. We'll be done grading this fall. We'll let the sanitary, you know, if we had a really great fall, we'd put some sanitary in this winter, but probably put the infrastructure in starting in the spring. And the school is about an 11-acre site. My understanding is, Pat, help me out here because you wrote the contract. The schedule on the school?
Basically, it's running concurrently with how we get this development going.
Okay.
So, in a year.
Can you repeat that just for the record?
Pat Solon just answered that it will run concurrently with the development and that the school plans to go at the same time as the housing starts. So it will, in their discussions, they're well into the site planning stages and going forward.
Ms. Klug?
Thank you. I was just curious if you could tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in that limited commercial area. Do you have an idea what kind of businesses you're looking at putting in, or what's the thought there? With it being by the trail, is that a big impact, little impact?
It's going to be pedestrian friendly and it's going to be a low rise. And that's really all Jerry has looked at. It won't be anything too intense. Perhaps some shops, perhaps some restaurants that would complement the pedestrian traffic that's going to be there. That's what's going to happen on the east side. On the west side, it's still under discussion, I believe, on whether that will be some commercial or some other type of residential use over there. The access is not very good on the other side. So, but anyway, it will be pretty low intensity development, and maybe that's about all I know right now. So.
No, that's good.
Okay.
And I don't know how this happens, but Councilman Mumgard and I always end up on the opposite side of splash pads. I like the idea. I think it would be good, especially knowing what's around in that area. I think it provides a lot of opportunities with knowing what parks are around there, that this would be something a little bit different. And I think that's something that we need, is more diversification in our parks. So I'm excited to see what you bring there that will, you know, make it a little bit different. So thank you.
I'd have to have a special session.
Thank you. We're still in public hearing. Do we have any other proponents?
Thank you.
You bet. Do we have any opponents? I'll close the public hearing. Next is a related item. Unfortunately, I think I still have to read the legal, and I feel like an auctioneer. F1, Resolution R220135, a public hearing and a vote. A resolution to approve a preliminary plat for the property legally described as attractive land being part of northeast quarter, the southeast quarter, part of the southeast quarter, the southeast quarter, part of the southwest quarter, the southeast quarter, part of the south northwest quarter, the southeast quarter, part of the northeast quarter, the southwest quarter, and part of the southeast quarter, the southwest quarter. Section 28, Township 14, North Range 12, east of the 6 p.m., Sarpy County, Nebraska. Generally located on the southwest corner, South 90th Street and Lincoln Road. The applicant's BHI Development. Again, it's a public hearing. We'll carry all the comments over from the other item unless you want to repeat them. Any proponents or opponents? I'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion to approve Resolution R220135? Motion by Councilman Glover. Second by Councilman Ingberg. Any other discussion? Please vote.
Seven yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. F2, R220141. Make sure I'm on the right one. Yep. A resolution to approve a COVID-19 paid sick leave for full-time and regular part-time employees in the 2022-2023 fiscal year. Is there a motion to approve Resolution R220141? Motion by Councilwoman Klug, second by Councilman Jaworski. Are there any proponents or opponents? Any council discussion? Mr. Sunday. Oh, yes, go ahead.
I question what the normal or average out time is now with the current version of COVID that we're seeing, because to me, 80 hours seems like a lot.
Is Ms. Svensson available? Did you get the question?
I did get the question. What is the average?
Yeah, I know when COVID first hit, of course, it was really knocking people out, and 10 days was pretty reasonable.
Yes.
I'm just wondering if it continues to be like that.
No, it's not. COVID, the CDC guidelines today are 5 days of quarantine, and then if you no longer have symptoms or a fever, then you return to work with a mask for 5 more days.
So I guess I'm questioning whether we need a policy that gives 80 hours a year when the average is now 5, in addition to the regular sick time that the employees are getting. It seems like 80 might be too much, given the. I would propose that we lower it to what the average is now, which is 5. 5 days, which I guess would be 40 hours, right?
I don't want to put you on the spot, but what do you think is reasonable based on the guidelines and that comment?
I would say that most of our employees are coming back within 5 days. I would also say that employees are not only getting it one time, but multiple times. So it's not like it's a one and done. So my concern would be, and especially for our part-time people who have no benefits, this has really been beneficial for them to get the time off and have it be paid. So I think leaving it at 80 is okay, because they do have to prove up that they have COVID. We have guidelines that say, you know, you have to either see a physician or have a proctored test done.
Right.
So,
Would mean then you could get it twice during the year
correct.
based on the CDC guidelines.
Yes, that's correct.
Did you
So,
want to make a amendment?
Well, is there some way that we could at least monitor whether they've recovered sufficiently in 5 days to get them back in 5 days, is what
yeah,
I'm saying.
yes, and we do. I mean, most employees are coming back within that 5 days. I think most employees want to get back to work. Most people that can work from home are working from home. So I did go back and look, and just in the last 5 months, the numbers are down significantly
Right.
from the first couple of years.
Right.
So I really think employees are working hard to stay well and to work from home when they can. But we also have a number of employees that can't, obviously.
Okay.
So.
All right, Mr. Mayor, I won't have an amendment. All right.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I do, Carrie, please. I noticed on this, it says, for qualifying COVID-19 related situations. Does that expand to make sure if our employees have like children that they're taking care of with COVID, these 80 hours can be spent that way? Because I don't know about anybody else sitting up here, but it feels like our employees are getting younger and younger, and I'm sure it's not because I'm aging.
I can't comment on that. So I think that it really does help our employees when they do have someone at home sick as well. So, and they have an exposure and a direct exposure if they're taking care of their children when they're sick or they don't have daycare.
Okay, and that would
So-
fall under Councilman Sundays. We want to make sure that we're just kind of monitoring it.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Yes. Yep, we
Thank
have to
you.
have proof and we are monitoring. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Please vote.
Seven yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. F3, Resolution R220142, a public hearing and a vote. A resolution to approve a large project special use permit for the property legally described as a portion of the southeast quarter and tax lot 8 of Section 34, Township 14 North, Range 11 East of the 6 p.m. Sarpy County, Nebraska, to be platted as Lot 8, Steel Ridge South, generally located on the northwest corner of Schramm Road and South 156th Street. The applicant is Rotella's Italian Bakery at Steel Ridge South. It's a public hearing. I'll open it. Proponents, welcome. If you'd state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. I am Michael Holden with Earhart Griffin & Associates, 3552 Farnham Street. I'm here with Jason with the Tipman Group as well. We're here for Rotella's Italian Bakery for the cold storage facility. That's a 48-acre lot. It's a large project, special use permit project. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Any other proponents? Do we have any opponents? I'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion to approve Resolution R220142? Motion by Councilman Ingberg, second by Councilman Jaworski. Any discussion? Please vote.
Seven yeas, 0 nays.
Next two items are related. F4, Ordinance 1971, An ordinance to approve a change of zone from AG agricultural, R2 single-family residential, R4 multifamily residential, and GC general commercial to R4 multifamily residential for the property legally described as a tract of land being a replatting of the following described properties: tax lots 6A, 1B3, tax lots 8A and 8B, tax lot 7A, tax lot 14B, 1A, tax lot 34A, and tax lot 38 in the north half of section 27, township 14 north, range 12 east of the 6 p.m., Sarpy County, Nebraska. Tax lot 7B in the southeast quarter of the northeast quarter of section 28, township 14 north, range 12 east of Sarpy County. Lots 1, 2, and 3, Chapman's and Horns Addition. Lot 2, Deloy Addition, Replat 1. And lots 1 and 2, Deloy Addition, Replat 2, generally located on the northwest corner of South Washington Street and Lincoln. The applicant's the city of Papillion and is basically all of the parkland. Is there a motion to approve ordinance 1971? Motion by Councilman Kloop. Second by Councilman Glover. Any discussion? Please vote.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Related item, I'm going to have to repeat the long legal again. F5, Resolution R220143. A resolution to approve a final plat for the property legally described as a tract of land being a replatting of the following described properties: tax lot 6A, 1B3, tax lots 8A and 8B, tax lot 7A, tax lot 14B, 1A, tax lot 34A, and tax lot 38 in the north half of section 27, township 14 north, range 12 east of the 6 p.m., Sarpy County, Nebraska. Tax lot 7B in the southeast quarter of the northeast quarter, section 28, township 14 north, range 12 east, Sarpy County. Lots 1, 2, and 3, Chapman's and Horns Addition. Lot 2, Deloy Addition, Replat 1. And lots 1 and 2, Deloy Addition, Replat 2, generally located northwest corner, South Washington and Lincoln Street. The applicant, City Papillion. Is there a motion to approve resolution R220143? Motion by Councilman Jaworski. Second by Councilman Stube. Any proponents or opponents? Any council discussion? Please vote.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. F6, Resolution R220147, a resolution to approve an interlocal cooperation agreement between the City of Papillion and Sarpy County for reimbursement for a portion of improvements to South 150th Street between Highway 370 and Shepard Street. Is there a motion to approve Resolution R220147? Motion by Councilman Jaworski, second by Councilman Glover. Any proponents or opponents? Council discussion? Please vote.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. Next is F7, Resolution R220153, a resolution to approve overnight camping for Boy Scouts of America at the City of Papillion Wellfield on September 23rd, 24th. We did publish that on the agenda, but they have subsequently asked that we rescind it. They had a conflict with that night, so we don't need to take any action on that item. We're approaching 7:30. That's when we published for the budget hearing. We're almost done with this agenda other than a closed session. So I think what we'll do is we'll wrap up this before the closed session. Then we'll take a quick recess of the regular council meeting, jump to the budget session, and then come back and do our closed session. So we'll jump to committee reports. Public Safety Committee.
Yeah, we met tonight. We had a couple main items that we were talking about, some nuisance concerns, and looking at our current ordinances on file to see how we handle them, especially with vehicle enforcement on private property. Just some general questions were being raised by staff as to how to move forward, what some of our options were. We gave some opinions and some suggestions based off of recommendations and what we see neighbors doing. It is going to go back to staff to work on with the hopes of bringing it forward in the next month or two. So that was the nuisance vehicles, and we also have continued to look at the property maintenance code, trying to move us forward with that, wanting to make sure that the homes in Papillion are all being good neighbors to each other with respect to the quality of maintenance that they're doing. We have started with Chapter 1, made progress on that, and have intentions of continually meeting on the first Tuesday of the month prior to our council meetings to continue to make progress. No idea when we're actually bringing it forward for the full council. The hope is much sooner than later. We do not want it to drag on much further at all. So hopefully late this year, but we're going to ask just a little bit of leniency in case we have some wording issues or some concerns with how it's laying out for us.
Thank you. Mr. Sunday.
I have a follow-up question about the nuisance discussions you had with vehicles. Are you discussing what is a nuisance vehicle, or what particular problems are we addressing?
Raised is that we wanted to clear up some language to make sure it is equally clear to our citizens as well as equally clear to our staff. And then there has been some concerns or lack of clear direction what elected officials were wanting from the city employees to do. So we want to clear up the language to make it very clear to the employee who has to actually go and knock on the door or deliver the letter, so that we are being accurate and clear and handling every situation the same way.
Are we talking about a vehicle that's a nuisance parked on its own property, or a vehicle that's just parked in the street all the time?
Primarily, we discussed nuisance vehicles being those that are inoperable, not licensed, motor sitting beside it, flat tires, hasn't ran for 3 months. That's the kind of thing that we're looking at, is those that truly are not being driven. That we feel like we've got a good handle what is happening in the right-of-way and on the streets. We're just starting to see more complaints of, is it actually being worked on or just stored there because it's easy to ignore?
Mr. Mumgard.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and add to that discussion. As I understood the discussion and the amendments, we're not discussing changing anything as to how a nuisance vehicle would be defined. That's been in the code since 1990, and that language is not being discussed changing. Most of the change was the enforcement of the existing code that's been there since 1990 and clarifying how police and the other staff go about getting this done. And in fact, what we were discussing and talking about was adding appeals processes so that homeowners would have greater transparency, greater flexibility in challenging the enforcement. But both on city streets and public property. So yes, we would be talking about people who would have a junked or abandoned vehicle on their driveway, in their backyard, stuff like that. Yeah.
Thank you. No other committees have met. Any comments from the floor? Yes, sir. Go ahead and come up. When you come up, state your name and address for the record, and we'll give you 5 minutes. Welcome.
Hello. So my name is Dr. Braddock. I live here in Papillion. What I was coming to talk to you guys about today.
Address, please.
What's that address? 805 South Beetle Street. So what I was coming to talk today was just, I might be able to save us some time. So clarification on language for Article 2, 85-4, and it's for fowl running at large. It says, no owner or keeper of chickens, ducks, geese, turkeys, guinea fowl, or any other fowl shall permit the same to run at large within the city at any time. I'd like some clarification on the running at large, if you could answer that question for me, because to me that makes it sound like as long as they're in an enclosure or something like that, that's not considered running at large. And if that's true, are we able to own them in the city of Papillion?
Yeah. Thank you. We can generally only discuss things that are published on the agenda, so we can take comment. We can't get into an active discussion. However, there is a period for council comment, so if somebody wants to comment on it, they might be able to. But if we can get your contact information, we can actually have staff reach out to you and work through all of the questions and make sure you're comfortable with the answers.
Gotcha.
I just like
Mr.
clarification. You mentioned a code section. What was that?
Article 2, 85-4.
-4.
Can you?
I'm going to look it up. Thank you very much.
And can you give Ms. Brown your contact information? And
Sure can.
We'll have staff reach out to you and go through that with you. Make sure your
Excellent.
questions are answered.
And just to make some general comments on it, just in case, my
Yep.
question isn't satisfied after
Yep.
we get that. I personally think that now would be the time to do it. I understand there's been some opposition to it in the past, but Omaha's already set precedents for it. Bellevue's already set precedents for it as well. I realize one of the largest issues that people have with it is either the keeping of ducks or roosters because they can be obnoxious. And I would say that we adopt similar ordinance to mimic what's already being done because the framework has been set and placed, and then other reasons to do it as well. So in a time when inflation is incredibly high, I mean, you've gone to Aldi's lately, it's still over $2 for 12 dozen eggs. So now it used to be 98 cents, adding more sustainability for our people. Myself as a doctor, one of the things I want is my patients to be able to eat healthy, afford their lifestyles, take care of themselves sustainably, and then also if we're concerned about food costs, 1 in 6 children in the United States currently has food instability or insecurity. So why would we not add another option to be able to help take care of our people, especially here in Papillion, which I used to live around here when everything south of 370 was still farmland and we're moving away from that. So let's get back to our agricultural roots a little bit and provide more sustainability to our communities by doing that. And one of the other things I'd like to mention while I was up here, so thank you for approving that paid sick leave for COVID-19. Many of my patients have debilitating illnesses still months after having their initial infections. And currently with the new variations and variants that keep coming out and aren't being covered by vaccines, so we just have the Beta 5 variant that is now being covered by the vaccines that are coming out this fall. So people are still getting sick. I'm still seeing it daily in my clinics. So please continue to take care of our people, and I appreciate you guys doing that and approving further leave for them.
Thank you. And before you leave, if you can give your contact information to Ms. Brown, we'll coordinate a conversation on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any other comments from the floor? Welcome. Name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, Mike Erdman, 926 South Madison Street. A couple of issues tonight. I know I only have 5 minutes. I appreciate Councilperson Ingberg and Klug still working on the property maintenance codes. That's one of the reasons why I came here tonight, to see where that stood. I've gotten an update from them prior to the council meeting, which was awesome. Something needs to be done. I've made 12 complaints since I've seen you all last. 11 of those have been for rental properties. The rental properties are a real problem in my neighborhood. There's 2 more rental properties now within a block of me. One of them is still up on the market for $18.50. It sits across the street from another rental property that's notorious in our neighborhood for problems. Last Monday, police were there, 3 police officers, approaching the tenants, walking into the property, talking to the tenants. They were probably there for 15 minutes, and within about a week, a lot of the cars are gone. The property's being cleaned up. Apparently, their scare tactic for the tenants that were living there proved fruitful. I'm not sure why they were there or who they were looking for, but it's straightening out. So the city needs to, I hope, push forward and get something really with some teeth here. All these other subdivisions were approved tonight. They all have HOAs, covenants and everything. I live in a 100-year-old neighborhood that has none of that. As I mentioned before, the city's our HOA. Something needs to be done. The raccoons are back next door. As I've complained before, 3rd year in a row. They've made holes on both sides of the houses. The landlord came over, threw a piece of plywood over it, no shingles or nothing. That's his minimal repairs. It's obscene that he gets away with that in our city, especially as beautiful as our city is and as nice it is, that he gets to take advantage of us, and that's just wrong. That's my comments on that. The second one is the Tower District. Grading's done, all the grading's gone, no more dust on my car and my house. Awesome. Infrastructure will go in next, but what I see is there's no, according to the plat, no sidewalks on the west side of 84th Street or the east side of 90th Street for our neighborhood Trumbull Park to get to this neighborhood, to have some connectivity. Big kerfuffle about pushing Harrison Street all the way through the park down there, across the creek and across. But there's got to be, there's a complete network of trail systems in this new development. It's going to be awesome. You don't even need to walk on a street to get to most of these places. There needs to be some connectivity, as we talked about with Mr. Sturzma before, from our Trumbull Park neighborhood to this particular new development. And I think a pedestrian bridge that would cross that from Trumbull Park to the truncated part of the new development on South Harrison Street would be a perfect solution. It would give us walkability, connectivity to those trails in our whole neighborhood, and I don't understand why that may have not even been thought of or proposed before. But as I thought about it, that may be our solution. I think for all of the neighbors, connectivity, no traffic, no extensions, none of that. So for some reason, everybody thinks that this creek behind Valley Road, along Valley Road, is some kind of conservative area, and it's really not. I've lived in Papillion. I moved in here in '69. Been part of this community for over 50 years. I played in that park in 1969 and 70s. That creek is truncated and all underground from 90th Street east is the only time it's open, and it crosses under 84th Street under a viaduct. So I'm not sure what's wrong with tampering this. The little earthen dams that they used to have there that would hold water, all that water that came off that field was before they ever terraced it. That's why there was so much water. That's why there was a holding pond there and so on. I mean, we used to catch crawdads and swim in that pond and ice skate on the other little one that was only a couple of feet deep. But by the middle of summer, it was dry. It was dead. There was nothing there. There was no water. And then once that was all terraced, that continued there. There's really no big water flow down that. And I don't understand why we're held hostage to maybe the federal government or something as some kind of conservative area. It does not make any sense at all. So I hope you guys would consider a pedestrian bridge as part of this plan as it develops. I think that would be a real good solution. And that's my comment there. Last thought, Mayor Black, you should be an auctioneer. I can't believe how you read these legal public descriptions so well. Thank you.
A couple of real comments. One, I'll ask Mr. Gibbons to take your comments about Tower District, and we can look into those. And as far as the waterway, you're right, that is a federal government deal with the Corps and the waterway and all of that stuff that we've got to deal with. And then the property maintenance, just for people that are watching this and aren't familiar with it, and the comments that you made, the property maintenance code that the safety committee is giving an update on is a direct response to what he was saying, and part of that will look to, on the enforcement side, absentee owners versus owner occupied. So thank you for your continued comments on that.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the floor? Just a couple updates from the last couple, any council comments, I'm sorry. Mr. Stubbe.
Yeah, Mayor, this is with regard to the Papillion Landing. So obviously, I'm sure that there's a number of council members that received emails from citizens that have most likely kids that are part of PRO. Can you talk a little bit about what the city's doing? Obviously, we have guidelines with regard to use of the landing. Can you talk a little bit about what we're going to do moving forward with regard to the policies?
Yeah, we have a preferred use policy for use of city fields in case multiple people want to rent it and you get into contention, kind of who trumps who. And we've had a long-standing policy that has been adopted, and it gives a little bit of a preference to PRO because they run most of the a lot of the recreational programs that the city doesn't run. The YMCA and the school district are kind of preferred users when there's conflicting space. I would think what you're referencing is when the Papillion Landing complex was built, council visited that policy and said, how does it apply to the landing? And specifically, the conversation gets to the field house. The important thing to remember is the Papillion Landing complex was not paid for by property tax dollars. It was paid by the half-cent sales tax that was voter approved. And so with the half-cent sales tax funding, it's people from outside Papillion helping fund that. And so the council at the time said the revenue from the field house would help cover the operations of the rest of the landing. So again, it didn't use property tax ongoing. And so with that, that it was not built with property tax dollars, and the revenue from it helps prevent property tax dollars funding the rest of the rec programs. The policy specifically said that the field house did not fall under the preferred field use policy. It's just basically who comes and wants to rent it gets to use it. And because of that, then there are other organizations other than PRO that sometimes get preferred time because they plan ahead and lease that space. And I think the emails you're seeing is contention of why isn't the field house part of the preferred use policy, and PRO gets to trump others. And so that's where the emails are coming from. What I'm doing, just because we've gotten a lot of them, and I think there's some misinformation out there based on what we're seeing in the emails, I am sending that to committee next on the 20th. We're going to send that back to committee to revisit the usage policy, and then basically look at that email, which basically is a grievance. So give the grievance a little bit of a hearing within the committee and see if the policy is right or if it needs to be changed, and then how do we communicate that back out. That answer? Okay, Mr. Sunday.
Yeah, I would just remind everybody, and I don't know all the details that you're talking about, Mr. Mayor, but when you get that many people complaining, we should take a good hard look at it. And I do remember when the Papillion Landing and the Field House were sold to the voting public on that bond issue, that it was to meet the expanding demands of our local sports teams. And we should be looking at that first. And I understand that people that aren't from Papillion shop here, but the vast majority of the shoppers locally are local people. And we should be serving them first, I believe. But that's all I have.
Any other council comments? Just a couple things from the last couple of weeks. League of Municipalities had a large legislative committee meeting just to look if there's any legislation we want to be presented at the state legislature this next session. Grow Sarpy, our economic development group, had a reception, kind of give an annual update. And the South Sarpy Sewer Agency had its regular monthly meeting. A big milestone with that, though, they did approve a contract to begin the construction of basically what's called Phase 1A. But if you remember how the drainage occurs in the South Sewer, everything flows south to the Platte River. So all those drainage areas go south. And then basically at Platteview Road, a big force main is going from Springfield to Bellevue to connect into the Omaha treatment plant. And so that infrastructure of the drainage south and then the force main needs to be built. And it can't all be built at the same time. And so a policy was adopted that identified the initial areas to be built. And so Phase 1 is the area south of Facebook, south to Springfield, so down Highway 50 and a little bit around Springfield. That opens up for development. And then what's called Zweibel Creek 3, which is a big drainage area that's basically south of Shadow Lake. Maybe, I'm going to guess, 60th, 48th, somewhere in there at about 82nd, and it all flows down to the Platte. Those are the two areas that will open up for development first. And so the Phase 1A project needs to put that infrastructure in south on those two areas, and then needs to put the force main in from Springfield to Omaha's plant by Bellevue. When the bids came back, they came back quite a bit higher than we anticipated. And so the question was, do we have the funding to do all of Phase 1, or do we have to do it in chunks? The agency made the decision to do it in chunks. And so what will be built is what is called Segment 3 and 4, which is basically the Zweibel Creek, which is south of Shadow Lake, serving Papillion's growth, down to the force main, then over to Bellevue. The piece that will not be built yet is the segment between basically 84th and Springfield. That'll be a second phase of Phase 1 as soon as we find the funding for that, and that's being actively worked. So the good news for Papillion is Zweibel Creek is on schedule to open up for development, and that's the area south of Shadow Lake. So that contract was let at the last sewer agency meeting. Mr. Glover, did you have a question?
Mayor, I just had a question. With that, what will the charge be for that? Who will charge us for that? Will that be Bellevue? Would that be Omaha?
There'll be one for a developer, just like it is today. When a developer develops a piece of ground, they have to pay connection fees, and it's I think it's based on per acre of how they're using it. And so they'll pay some connection fees, which will help continue to build the infrastructure. But then as far as the actual uses of that sewer, once it's up and operating, our rate study will have that. But we will have a contractor, an interlocal with the city of Omaha, because we're hooking into their plant. So there will be a charge from Omaha for the plant. for the treatment.
So, will just the users pay for that, or will all of Sarpy County be a part of that?
As if the infrastructure gets built out normally, the developers pay a big piece of the infrastructures they're developing. Homeowners, when they pull a building permit and connect, pay a connection fee, and then once they're connected, they pay the usage. And so, from that perspective, it's like it is today. The existing residents and homeowners don't pay for the new development. The development pays for the development. Now, if everything would for some reason fall apart, it's been built, we're not getting enough fees in, and now you're into a default situation, I'm really bad down the road. Who ultimately pays? Sarpy County's the backstop on the ultimate payment, and that's how we issued the bonds. Not the city residents, but all of Sarpy County. So, Mr. Sunday.
I just wanted to share with everybody that out on the campaign trail, more than one of my constituents has asked the same question, and that is essentially, with all of this growth that Papillion's seen in all directions, and with the property value increases in all of our homes, the mammoth increases in the last 3 or 4 years, it stands to reason that the city's taken in a lot more money. How come, I'm asked, why are we only getting a 2% reduction in the levy? And I think it's a fair question.
And maybe we can jump to the budget hearing, but real quick on that, I think a lot of people see the development in the SIDs and make an assumption that the city's getting the property tax from all of the new development, when in reality we're getting zero property tax from all of that development. So,
Major annexations during the last 3-4 years.
oh yeah, once it comes into the city, but the new developments in the SIDs, that property tax goes to that SID to pay the bonds, and those bonds were issued to build out the development for that SID. So, any other council comments? Okay, we do have a closed session, but it's part of this agenda, so what I'm going to ask is we'll do a motion to recess. That'll put a pause on the regular council meeting, then we'll jump to the budget meeting, finish that, and then go back to closed session. So is there a motion to recess? Motion by Councilman Klug, second by Councilman Glover. Do we have any proponents or opponents on a motion to recess? Any council discussion? Please vote on the motion to recess.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
Motion passes. This is a new meeting, so we'll call the meeting to order. It was published for 7:30. It's 7:52. Ms. Brown, would you please take the roll?
Sunday. Mumgarde. Gaines. Glover. Jaworski. Klug. Stube. Ingberg.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. And do we have an affidavit of publication on file?
We do.
And a current copy of the Open Meetings Act is in the back of the council chambers. Item B1, Ordinance 1974, an ordinance to approve the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget. This is a public hearing, but before I open the public hearing, there was a change made to state law. Well, they've made a couple of changes. A couple of years ago, they made a change where we have to have a separate meeting, which is this meeting, and there has to be a budget presentation, and I'll give an overview, and that'll be the budget presentation for that. This is not the third reading, so it's not council discussion and a vote. That'll be at the next council meeting. But then after the budget presentation, this will be the public hearing, so we'll open it and take comments, proponents or opponents on that. The other thing that they introduced for this year was an extra public hearing beyond the one we're having today. And that one is hosted by the county, and it includes all jurisdictions in the county that have greater than 2% increase above their certified real growth. They have to participate in that. We do not have to participate in that because we're below that threshold. I wanted to just give a little bit of perspective. I kind of gave the same perspective last year. An idea of known unknowns. How do you plan? And there's things you don't know, but In this case, we know we don't know them. It's not like it's a hidden thing out there that we can't even think about. And last year, that overriding issue with dealing with the budget was the ramifications of a global pandemic none of us had dealt with. This year, the overriding issue is the inflationary pressures that I think are real. Potential recession, continued global supply chain, regional labor issues, all while does a pandemic come back in the winter? This is only the second winter, so a lot of things we don't know, but we know what those drivers are. And like last year, there's a lot of jurisdictions to deal with that. They're cutting staff, they're reducing services, they're renegotiating agreements with unions. And last year, we didn't have to do any of that, and we're not doing that this year either. But I think what's important for a perspective is to look at the economic data that right now. An 8.5% inflation rate for the 12 months ending July of 2022, and that's just off of June, which was the largest increase since 1981. A 9.5% increase in the consumer price index for the Midwest region for all urban consumers. Energy prices up 44.5%, food prices up 11.9%. It's based on the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics in July. A 5.9% increase in Social Security benefits for 2022, and it's projected potentially a 10.5% increase for Social Security in 2023. A 0.75% increase in the short-term borrowing rates by the Federal Reserve last month. That's on top of a 1.75% earlier in the year, and that's the largest increase in almost 30 years. If you think about that, highest increase of that in 30 years in inflation, the largest increase since 81. For those that are old enough, start thinking of the early 80s. Those are like 1979 to 1981, and then think of what we were heading into in the mid-80s. So it could be argued that we've already entered a recession based on the historical definition of a fall in the GDP for 2 consecutive quarters. Some would argue we are or we aren't, but it doesn't matter. None of us have a crystal ball, so whether it's a temporary bump in the national economy or just a 1-year issue or even a 2-year challenge, we've got to deal with it. So no matter the length, we know for a fact that there are unknowns in all of that. So once again, the proposed budget is coming from an idea of let's plan for the worst and hope for the best. And that's actually been a lot of our practice, manage to what we have and try to do it without impacting services. And then the same practice we've always had, if it's not as bad as we think, then we tend to do a mid-year adjustment then to normalize it to what's really happening. So that'll be the idea again. So some of the wise planning, again, it's just a real thanks to you. For the last 6 years, we've really protected the cash reserves to be in place for a time in the future that we could face a recession or an economic downturn. Who thought that it would be both of those together plus a pandemic? But those policies were really important, and you did formalize those policies in the cash reserve policy a number of years ago, and that has proven absolute critical. So because of that, protecting those reserves, the budget does retain our current staff levels. It honors our agreements with the individual bargaining units. It doesn't defer any critical maintenance. It does not jeopardize the 1-year road plan or the capital improvement plan. It maintains our current levels of service. It doesn't call for the issuance of any new debt, and it does not increase the levy. In fact, it does slightly reduce it, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. So again, thank you for the wisdom in approving that cash reserve policy a number of years ago. So the highlights of the budget. I think you'll find it's right in line with all of the individual budget meetings we had in the last month, and it's in line with the council goals from the last retreat that we had. So from a revenue perspective, sales and property tax make up about 53% of our revenue. Sales tax is our largest source at 35%, but remember that's our most volatile source and the most impacted by economic changes. We're projecting 12.9 million receipts, which is about a 4% increase over prior year on sales tax. Property tax is proposed to be lowered again. on the levy side. The proposal is a 2% reduction to just under 43.5, and that will probably then continue the trend of Papillion being the lowest municipal level of all of the communities in Douglas and Sarpy County. Now, the certified valuation, to Mr. Sunday's point, is that's up 9.84%. Now, 7.23 of that is what the legislature calls real growth, new development, new buildings, and that type of thing. And so then the difference of that, 2.61, is the organic growth. So an individual home in Papillion aggregated together went up 2.6% this year from the certified values from the assessor. So if you got an existing property with a 2.6% increase on valuation and a 2% decrease on the levy, that means the actual property tax went up just over a half of 1%, 0.56. And again, the state's threshold is stay below 2, and we're at 0.56, which is why we don't have to participate in that other hearing. A median priced home in Papillion, according to the Census Bureau, would, based on that median price, would see a $5.36 increase for the year, or 21 cents a month increase based on the budget. The total property tax for that median home would be $965 a year, or $80.41 a month. Considering the economy, most of the other revenues in the budget we're projecting flat, or basically the other revenues, not sales tax or property tax, we're basing those off of the prior year before COVID as our baseline. For the general fund, not
May I
Yes, sir.
interrupt?
Go ahead.
The median priced home that I'm looking at, median priced home says the
222,309 for the set.
that seems about $100,000 low to me, based on what I'm seeing. That can't be correct, can it? 222,000
That'd be
is the median?
My house wouldn't be too far from that.
I'm looking at
I'm
a
in
market report online right now that says it's about 100,000 more than that.
Well, they're taking in the SIDs if you're looking at the MLS market reports. This is the Census Bureau, so it's looking at the census tracts within city limits. And based on that, my house is in Overland Hills. It'd be pretty close to that median.
Even the smallest of houses in Papillion are selling for over 200,000 now.
Yeah, 222 median.
Smallest of houses.
Right. Yeah. Which the core of Papillion, the older part, would be a heavy part of that. The MLS data that you'd be looking at would include the SIDs. The census data would take in the tracts.
I just want to make sure that we're using correct and accurate numbers here.
The percentages would be the same. It'd be that total dollar amount would vary, but for every 100,000, so you take the number any way you want it, every 100,000, the project would be 442. So just put a multiplier on that, 2 or 3 or 4 times, whatever. So yes, sir.
Can I just interject
Yep.
something? So you're using 2020 census information, correct?
Correct.
Right? And so I think we all recognize that, to your point,
For the median home.
Median.
Which is why sometimes I think it's easier for everybody to just talk about per 100,000, because then you can just multiply it out however you want.
yeah, but I think we can also recognize that over probably the last year and a half, that home prices have jumped significantly, and we're not taking into account those increases because we're using 2020 census.
Now,
correct?
that 2.61 valuation increase, the 2% levy decrease translating to a 0.56 real property tax, that number holds true per 100,000. So if you believe the home price is 300, we'll just take the 442 and multiply by 3. It's still 0.56 no matter the home price. On the general fund, not unexpected on the expense side, personnel is our largest area. It's about 70% of our total expenditures is personnel. The proposed budget does account for the increases in the benefits that are consistent with the union agreements you had previously approved. And then for the management exempt that are not under the agreements, a 3% increase there. Health and dental insurance is projected at 15%. Hopefully we'll come in a little bit lower, but we've had it higher. And that's the real wild card, so we're projecting that at 15 for the budget. Workman's comp up 3%. Life and long-term disability, we are not projecting an increase, so that's staying even. Most of the staffing issues were resolved in last year's budget. You know, we did some staff ads last year. So that only got minimal hiring of new staff in this budget to keep up with the growth. We've got one part-time HR secretary that is general fund supported. 2 full-time sewer department positions. Those are not general fund. Those are funded by the sewer fund. 1 golf professional, not property tax. That's supported by golf. And then a part-time public safety committee outreach position, which is a carryover from the prior year that hadn't been filled. And so in line with the council priorities, we're going to continue to invest in supervisor and leadership development as well. There's some dollars in there to continue personal growth of folks. On the public safety side, that's the largest portion from a department perspective of our general fund budget. The police department with the budget will continue the relationship with the school districts. We've got the SROs, so those continue to be funded. It retains the CALIA certification. There's a cost to that, and we just got recertified in CALIA, and so this budget commits to keeping that going. And then some funding to start the design to renovate the police station. If you remember, that station was built, looking at Ms. Klug, 20 years ago. 20 to 25 years ago is when that was built, and it was actually it was value engineered. Cost was driven out, and because of that, I think some things were compromised. HVAC's always been a problem. Lighting's been a problem. It was built at the time, I think, for about 30 personnel. We're up to about 55 to 56. And so a 20-year-old building, double the staff. What's the needs in the next 10 years? So kind of like we did the City Hall building. Don't knock it down and build new, but how do you use the space better? Update the HVAC, update the lighting. So the design to start that will be funded in the budget. In the fire department, continue the relationship with La Vista and the Papillion Rural Fire. Those 2 organizations fund about 58% of the fire budget, and then fees cover another 8%. So then we pick up the gap, and that's in the budget. And the primary new budget items are upgrades to software systems, patient care and EMS, billings, and fire records management is the main investment on the fire side. Streets continue to heavily invest within city limits. We started the pavement management plan about 4 years ago, where the first year we had the mapping done to create the data to understand the condition of every street. And then since then, the first year we did a 4-fold increase in the street repair budget to about $2 million. That was in 19 and 20. We've continued that each year, and we're continuing that same level in this year. We're adding an inflation factor, so it'll be $2.4 million for continued implementation of the pavement management plan. We also know that potholes and general repairs still pop up, and so we've got about $200,000 in a general repair budget in addition to the pavement management plan. And just like the prior 3 years, all of that is funded from cash reserves, no bonded debt for that. In the capital improvement plan, which is funded from general fund, we've got about $2.425 million in that. The main projects, the approval of the 1-year road plan is in there. Those are hitting South 90th. If you think of the Tower District, South 90th, 90th and Highway 370 turn lanes, improvements at South Washington and Cedardale, some improvements at Cedardale and Highland, reconstruction of Monroe Street behind the junior high by the park, and then a replacement road at Walnut Creek recreation area. And then also continued upgrade of the traffic signals in town, and then a vehicle. There's a new dump truck, a street vehicle, and 3 police vehicles. So that's the capital improvement plan. And all of those projects are on the current plan. Nothing new is popping in there. And again, it's all paid from cash reserves, no bonded debt. On the bond fund, the percentage of the total levy that's dedicated to the bond fund is about 23.7% of the levy goes to bond. That's down from 42% just a few years ago. And the outstanding debt for the bond fund is $93.2 million. 64.8 of that is the voter-approved Papillion landing, and the total debt is down almost 10% from 2 years ago. The total annual debt service, excluding Papillion Landing, is $4.35 million, and that is fully funded. And the cash reserve in the bond fund is approximately $6 million, so we're healthy on the bond fund. We will continue, we believe, to hold our investment grade rating from Moody's. We're in AA1. That was upgraded from an AA2 in April of 2018, and we've held that, and I don't think we see any reason that that wouldn't hold true. With the raising interest rate environments, we probably will not see any opportunities to refinance bonds like we have historically been doing. I think we've taken care of all those opportunities, but the good news is Nancy and her staff watch that pretty aggressively, so most of it has been refinanced at the lower rates, so we're pretty favorable there. The recreation fund, which includes the landing and the field house, also has some non-revenue generating things. You see the fun things we do, the farmer's market, the Easter egg hunts, some of the concerts, the kid days, the race series, free events and movies at Sumter. Those need to be funded, and we budget in the general fund approximately $193,000 on the non-revenue items for the recreation department. And then a major portion of the landing complex is supported by the revenue that the complex generates, the membership fees, the user fees, and the rental fees, and the other non-tax. There is a portion, and we implemented this last year, a portion of the staff is funded by general fund, and council made that change last year, so we're staying consistent with council's policy from the prior years. Our proprietary are our restricted funds, not property tax. The big one is the water and sewer fund. No major changes because those operate under the rate study that the council approved a few years ago. I think we do it about in a 5-year cycle, that rate study, and so we're still operating under the previously approved rate study for that. The outstanding debt in the water fund is about $8.9 million, 8.915. That's down 2.3 from 2 years ago, and our annual debt service there is about $1 million. We continue there to also hold our Moody's rating. They rate that separately because it's not backed by property tax, and we have an AA2 rating, and we've held that, and we don't anticipate that that will drop either. Included in the budget for water, painting of the North Water Tower is in it this year, and then a trailer for emergency water main break repair. So if there's a break, they can just pull the trailer with all the equipment and get to the site quicker and be more efficient. On the sewer side, we've been doing a relining project of the sewer, so continuation of the relining will be going, and then the 2 sewer employees for the maintenance operations of the sewer lines that I had mentioned earlier. Golf is a proprietary fund and not supported by property tax. All of that revenue is just from the general operations of the golf department, and Rob's been doing an excellent job there. I don't think any property tax has gone to golf in probably 10 years, if my memory is right, and he's been building up the cash reserves a little bit and not deferring maintenance. And so with that, there is a need for if Rob feels a need for another full-time golf professional, and his historical revenues will cover that, so we're offering that position because of the increased demand. There is a lease purchase for some golf carts. Continue with the routine cart path repairs so we don't get behind there at both courses. Annual tree work, because we know that those are easy to forget, and then we end up with a problem with trees. A tee expansion at Eagle Hole 12, if you're a golfer, the one high up on the hill. Do a tee expansion and an upgrade of that hole, and then some irrigation repairs at both of the courses, and then use $150,000 from golf reserves to help on the bond payment with Rob. So it's really golf. The voter-approved half-cent sales tax, remember that by law is dedicated to Parks and Recreation, and that there's a couple of things. One is council adopted a policy, a cash reserve policy on the landing, that we had to have a certain amount in reserves based on prior year. That is fully funded. The bond payments are fully funded, And then, so the bond payments were fully funded, and the required reserve based on the policy the council adopted is fully funded. In addition to that, we had $700,000 that was previously approved for natural recreation, natural play areas. That's being carried over. It was not used last year, and that will be managed under the park master plan earmarked for natural play areas. And then the new projects that are included this year, we started about 3 or 4 years ago focusing on neighborhood parks and slowly doing upgrades of neighborhood parks. Schweer Park will be getting some play equipment, and then we'll be doing lighting at Halleck West Field. And then a lot of those, if they don't have lights, we're adding lights, and if they've got lights, the old ones, we're moving to LED for efficiency and keeping the light on the field. And then the design for the Halleck Park Loop Road, so the internal road to Halleck Park, a lot of drainage issues, the road's in pretty bad shape, and so we're going to do a whole design of what's the appropriate rebuild of that road. So the design dollars are in this budget, not the implementation. Community betterment, that's the Keno dollars. Again, by law, those are restricted to community projects. This year, funding for a small entrance sign at the Arboretum. I don't think many people are aware we have a state-certified Arboretum, and so we'll get some signage on that. A small partial contribution as a matching dollars to a potential sculpture at Black Elk Recreation Area to recognize and honor Chief Black Elk. The NRD and some private donors are looking to help contribute to that as well. Natural bike trail project at the Papillion Landing, support of the proposed Arts Foundation based on the memo of understanding the council already supported. There was a dollar amount in the exhibit for potential funding, so that is in here. And then we always do some partnership projects with the Sarpy Chamber, their leadership group. They do projects through town, and to make sure those projects are proper and maintainable, we usually contribute a little bit to those, and staff helps with some in-kind. A small enhancement at Veterans Park, and then the continued replacement of our American flags and our banners as they get worn by weather. And then the last one is just a carryover project from the current year. One is the restroom at Walnut Creek Recreation Area for the Nebraska Vietnam Veterans Memorial. That was previously funded. Obviously the work's not done yet, so we're carrying that over. And then we always have a little bit in earmarked for downtown revitalization. No specific plan, but as opportunities come up, there's an authorization for some funds. COVID money. There's 2 chunks of federal money. And each one has a specific intent, and the rules kept changing, but we know kind of what the original intent was. The first package was passed in March of 2020 under the Trump administration, and that's the one you hear is the CARES Act, Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. And with the Trump CARES Act, we've gotten approximately $1.3 million. And about 90,000 of that was spent last year for some upgrades in the police department for equipment and technology, and it was kind of earmarked towards public safety. And then the remaining we're budgeting to help with the police department renovation project that I mentioned earlier. And then we'll also get about 1.7 million in CARES. We already did, and that's what the MFO, the partnership between Papillion, La Vista, and the Rural Fire, that board had earmarked that for the renovation of Fire Station 3 that's going on now. So basically the CARES money is going to police and fire. The second batch of money was passed in March of 2021. That's the Biden money. That's the ARPA money, American Rescue Plan Act. And our allocation there is about $3.6 million. The first payment we already received, and that's handled in the current budget year. And the tentative plan for the balance of that is use it for construction of a clear well project with the water department. And that project would start in probably fiscal year 2023, 2024, so the next budget. So we'll basically show the receipt of the money, but not the use of the money. Nebraska Advantage, that's the state's economic development program, and we talk a lot about it, where sales tax has to be rebated. That's important in this year's budget. We did get notice from the state that they're going to be taking back $41 million in sales tax revenue based on claims that have been made. They'll take that a bit each month starting in January of 2023. Thankfully, you also adopted as part of our cash reserve policy a number of years ago that we have to look at our trends of sales tax, and if we see an anomaly or a spike, we reserve some of those dollars because we know it's probably somebody that's spent that's going to ask for it back. And so Nancy's been doing a lot of magic over the years to build a model to look at those trends and manage that balance. And so we have the dollars to manage through that. So if the state takes back some of our sales tax and our check is shorted, we've budgeted for a certain amount of dollars. We have that in the reserve to take care of. So we think we're okay there. So a big thank you to Nancy on how she's built that model. And then because that is such a big issue that the state, one, they sign the agreements and don't tell us who they're signing them with, so we don't know what our liability is. And then two, we don't get a lot of notice when the claim is made, so you really can't budget for it. We're going to keep working with the United Cities and the League of Municipalities to keep working the state legislature on transparency related to that. One, let us give notice that they're signing an agreement. Hopefully we can be a signer on the agreement. And then three, give us more reporting of what's in our check every month. But so far that's been a losing battle with the state, but we're going to keep fighting that. I think it's actually a constitutional issue because that sales tax was voter approved for a specific purpose, and now the state comes and takes it for a different purpose, but nobody's, I think, been willing to challenge that, so we just live with it. So in closing, I just want to thank Amber, Phil, Nancy, all the department heads, a lot of leadership and expertise that goes on. They're dealing with a lot, the pandemic, the economy, the supply chain, the staffing, and they still maintain the financial integrity in our bond rating. I want to thank you as the council. We continue to manage a lot of growth. We protect the financial condition of the city. We've got the cash reserves for the bad times. We have not raised our debt in a long time. In fact, we've been aggressively lowering our debt. And then we continue to provide high levels of service. So I just want to walk back through because I know it's a big question on the levy and the property tax. We got updated numbers from the assessor since the letter was put together that went with the introduction of the budget. Again, I was using the Census Bureau median home, but I understand where that creates misunderstanding or conflict or discussion. So if you just stick with per 100,000, so whether you got a $500,000 house or a $200,000 house, the percentage proportions still work out the same. The certified valuation by the assessor increased 9.84%. Of that, 7.23% was what they call real growth, new development, not the existing homes. So existing homes this year, on average of all of Papillion, went up 2.61%. You take that 2.61% increase with a 2% reduction in the levy, that translates to the 0.56% increase. Per 100,000, the $100,000 house last year with a 2.61% increase would make that a 102,611 valuation. You decrease the levy, their property tax last year would have been $445.36 per 100,000. This year it'd be $442.89, or a $2.47 increase per 100,000, the 0.56%. So that's on the levy side. The cash reserve policy that you approved in 2010, again, has been absolutely critical the last 2 to 3 years, and we're going to continue to manage to that. I want to thank the employees. They continue to serve the residents. They're faithful, they're professional, they're caring. They respect the work of the council. They respect the goals that were set. They and I think we all understand there's other jurisdictions that are cutting staff and cutting things, and we're pretty blessed that we're able to hold the line and keep the investment. If you remember back to the council retreat, you created a mission statement to preserve our small town feel, promote quality of life while delivering exceptional services for our residents, visitors, and businesses, and to sustain an environment, physical, social, and economic, that people are proud to call home. And then you had some underlying goals. I think you'll find that the budget still supports all of that, and just want to thank you for that. Just a final statement, we once again were awarded the Certificate Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting by the Government Finance Officers Association. That is a voluntary program. It takes our audit, puts it into a slightly different, more format that's more readable, and then we voluntarily submit that to a national review board, kind of a peer review, to make sure we're following generally accepted accounting practices and readability and transparency, and then a board votes on the award, and we've gotten that. I think we've participated now for 10 years, and I think 8 or 9 of those we've received that award, and we were recently notified we got it again, so congratulations to Nancy. That was the budget presentation. It is a public hearing. We will have council discussion and vote next time, but we do allow, I think a lot of times we've had questions during our public hearing. So Mr. Stu.
Yeah, I just have one question with regard to the change in state law. And obviously, that anybody that's a property owner gets a tax statement. City of Papillion is just one component of that tax statement. So you've got the NRD, you've got the county, you've got school districts, and I don't know what percentage of the dollar is the City of Papillion, but is the change in state law with regard to a Sarpy County public hearing only applicable to the cities within the county, or is it applicable to the other taxing jurisdictions?
Do this off memory. It's not every taxing jurisdiction, but it's the major ones. So it's the school district, it's the county, it's the city. There may be a fourth one, but it's not the Agricultural Society. It's not the NRD, I don't think. So it's primarily schools, cities, and counties. This is a public hearing. I'll open it. Do we have any proponents? Anybody want to speak in favor? Any opponents? Then I'll do neutral. Anybody just wants to make general comments? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion by Councilman Glover. Second by Councilman Jaworski. Please vote.
Seven yeas, 0 nays.
We are adjourned, so I don't think we need a motion to come back into the regular meeting, so we'll just come back into the regular one. But we're at the point of closed session. And just for education for people that watch this, we can only go into closed session, I think, for 3 reasons. They're generally around negotiation items where you don't want to tip your hand. Land negotiations is one. If you're talking personnel actions where you need to, you don't want to, you need to talk negotiation on a personnel item, you can go behind closed doors too. It's the only time that a quorum of the council can get together outside of a formal meeting. And we can only talk about the things that we say we're going to talk about. And if somebody does talk about something else in there, it's actually a misdemeanor. And the other members in there have an obligation to call them on it. And there were no votes taken. Any votes that are taken are back out into a public session. We have no other votes coming out of session tonight, so the only thing we have left is the closed session. Is there a motion to go into closed session to protect the public interest to discuss potential litigation and real estate negotiations? Motion by Councilman Stubbe. Second by Councilman Jaworski. Do we have any proponents or opponents? Any council discussion? Please vote.
7 yeas, 0 nays.
I will state for the record, the purpose of the closed session is only to discuss potential litigation and real estate negotiations. Closed session will include the mayor, the city council, deputy city administrator, deputy administrator community development, assistant city attorney, the city clerk, and the human resources director. I'll restate the only topics discussed in closed session were potential litigation and real estate negotiations. Motion to come out by Klug, second by Stubbe. Please vote. We can do verbal. Vote on motion to come out of closed session. We got a motion and a second. Now we just need vote.
Yep. 7 yeas, 0 nays.
Do we have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Sunday, second by Glover. Please vote. We are adjourned.
7 yeas, 0 nays.